Welcome to Nugget 109 with Steve Groman, and today we're going to ask, are you willing to compromise Genesis with the evolutionary humanist?
Well, I'm going to say absolutely not.
Me too.
According to Merriam-Webster, humanism is a devotion to the humanities, literary culture, a revival of classical letters, individualistic, critical spirit, emphasis on secular concerns, characteristics of the Renaissance. Number 2 is devotion to human welfare. Number 3 is a doctrine, attitude, or way of life centered on human interest or values, especially a philosophy that usually rejects supernaturalism and stresses an individual's dignity and worth and capacity for self-realization through reason.
And that's the one we're going to focus on.
Therein lies the problem. Yes, that is what has been going on with a lot of our society these days. The Bible does say that God made everything. A lot of times people say, well, I believe that and that's good enough for me. But we've said for many years that sometimes people think that the creation versus evolution is a side topic, but it's not. It's the topic. It's the issue in everything. Everything falls into one of two categories. Either there is a God or there's not. There's the God of this creation and there's the God of this world. And everything shakes out into one of those two categories. The problem is the God of creation has been put on the back burner in our society. The God of this world has just taken advantage of that. The humanistic philosophy is all that we ever hear.
In Scientific American, February 2017, they had this article called Imagine No Universe. And it said that nothing excludes creation ex nihilo. If by nothing is meant that there is no physical, mental, platonic, or non-physical entity of any kind, then there can be no God or gods, which means that there cannot be anything outside of nothing from which to create something. This negates the Christian theologian argument that God created the universe ex nihilo, or out of nothing, based on the English translation of Genesis 1:1, that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And this is sort of a perfect example of humanism where they want to get rid of God, and they're just flat out saying it in this article. And I don't think that many people would recognize this as humanism, but this is classic.
Well, it is, because they're basically saying there is no way there can be a God because you can't have something that came from nothing. Well, then, of course, they don't know God. He's the creator of everything. One answer has to do with our discomfort with the Copernican principle, which holds that we are not special. We prefer religious and anthropic explanations that the universe was created and fine-tuned for us, because that puts humans right back in the center. Now, that is exactly their problem. We cannot be special. But they say that puts humans right back in the center of the cosmos, anthropocentrically. It is all about us. But 500 years of scientific discoveries have revealed that it isn't about us. And therein lies again the problem. These people want us to interpret the Bible based on what they come up with, the same way that that's what they do.
This is a very interesting subject, and we're not going to go off on geocentric versus heliocentric at this time, but I do want to read this, that in astronomy, the geocentric model, known as geocentrism, often exemplified specifically by the Ptolemaic system, is a superseded description of the universe with Earth at the center. Under the geocentric model, the sun, moon, stars, and planets all orbited Earth. The geocentric model was the predominant description of the cosmos in many ancient civilizations, such as those of Aristotle in classical Greece and Ptolemy in Roman Egypt.
They're not saying here that it has to do with the science that they supposedly come up with, but yet it's the philosophy about it. It puts us in the center or not. Of course, it's not about us. But the Bible does say man is made in the image and likeness of God. This place was put here to be inhabited. We've covered that before. What about Lawrence Krauss here?
Lawrence Krauss is one of the most famous theoretical physicists, and he was most recently attached to Arizona State University, and he is a very popular, charismatic speaker, probably the most respected in the United States, I would think.
Well,
one of the most prominent, along with Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah, it's more appropriate to say was, because as of this year, he got into quite a bit of trouble.
Well, because of some personal issues, his prominence in the science scene has been diminished, and we won't be hearing from him probably too much. But he has been extremely vocal over the past decades.
Extremely vocal, and his information made it everywhere.
And one of the things that he was vehement against is creation and any religion, and his quotes are just absolutely incredible. But here's one from this particular article called Faith and Foolishness that he wrote in August of 2010 in Scientific American, where he said that religious leaders should be held accountable when their irrational ideas turn harmful. Well, I think that evolutionists need to be accountable for when they become harmful.
The article actually ends with this paragraph. It says, keeping religion immune from criticism is both unwarranted and dangerous. Unless we are willing to expose religious irrationality whenever it arises, we will encourage irrational public policy and promote ignorance over the education of our children. children. And this is where the rub comes in. It's the antagonism towards God is really quite prominent in the science community. We can't just discuss differences of ideas. It's a battle, in fact.
Humanism is just entwined in all evolutionary science.
It is. In fact, they have had such a big push for the last many, many years that even as far back as 2012, Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life released a survey result, and CNN reported that the fastest growing religious group in America is made up of people with no religion at all. That is a sobering statement because that is what their goal has been. Let's try to ridicule religion fast enough and long enough and hard enough that people will just walk away from it and bring up a society knowing that that's the understanding and that's what's happened.
Right, make Christians timid
Yes.
and feel ignorant, and then
Yes, and then
who would want to be put in that position? And they've glorified humanism.
We bring up a society, a young group of people in that mindset, and that's all then they know. It's amazing.
This is extremely important, and we can only touch on a few minutes here. Dr. Eugenia Scott is one of the signatories to the Third Humanist Manifesto titled Humanism and Its Aspirations, and it was written in 2003. I would venture to guess that most people have no idea that there was a second, much less a third, Humanist Manifesto. These people are aggressive. They're working, and not even behind the scenes. They are in front of the scenes. And she is well known as one of the most outspoken humanists on creationism and intelligent design. In 2004, Dr. Scott authored Evolution versus Creationism, an introduction, and she also co-edited with Glenn Branch the 2006 anthology, Not in Our Classrooms, Why Intelligent Design is Wrong for Our Schools.
In the early days of the ministry, I'd go into public schools all the time. And it's harder and harder these days. If creation is so foolish and just so without evidence, then any university should welcome me, people like me in there to show that how foolish we are and that kind of thing, that we don't have any evidence. The problem is we're the ones with all the evidence and they know it. So the ridicule is all that they have. And they push that pretty hard these days.
We all know what Madalyn Murray O'Hair was able to do in the 60s and the effects of what that one woman did. And Dr. Eugenia Scott has been sort of the modern day Madalyn Murray O'Hair, and she has devastated the schools and pushed humanism in the schools, unbeknownst to most parents.
Yes, and let's go on. Let's talk about Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is a very widely respected evolutionist today. And he has said that faith is a belief that is not based on evidence and that it is one of the world's greatest evils, one of the world's great evils. He's a major critic of creation, and he defines religious belief that humanity, life, and the universe were created by a deity without recourse to evolution. He is a staunch anti-creation guy.
He's famous for saying that he describes young Earth creationist view that the Earth is only a few thousand years old as a preposterous, mind-shrinking falsehood. Now, Richard Dawkins is sort of like the European counterpart to Lawrence Krauss and Eugenia Scott. These three people have influenced this world in more ways than most of us can even imagine. They are well steeped in humanism.
Major influence. And we wonder why we have the troubles that we have today. People have no value, no self-worth. They just feel terrible a lot of times, and they start to act out on those feelings. They've been taught they're just animals. They act like animals, and people can't figure out why.
And we see these pictures of these children that were killed in Florida.
And we've been to several of these kind of places where
we do
these
go
disaster
to a lot of them.
places. Yes, we stopped at several
And these are
of them.
real people,
Real people.
Their lives have been cut out because of this humanistic philosophy that is pervading our society. And we do, again, recommend Lesson 8, Darwin's Legacy, and Lesson 1, Why is this important?, where Steve goes into tremendous detail about these people and just how humanism is exploding and creating havoc in our society and in our churches and amongst our children. Among adults, too. Many are being led astray by this mindset of minimization of humanity. And we need to expose these people, and that's what we're trying to do in these nuggets.
Yes. Yeah, and we've been to several of these places, whether they're schools, remember the Pulse nightclub, whether it was church shootings. It is amazing how the despair on a lot of people. These places always have a memorial type thing that just naturally develops on the property. It's sobering to see the people and how they want to show respect, and they write the people's names who were victims, but they have no hope. They don't know where to turn.
They feel helpless.
They do feel helpless, and you can see it in the way that the thing is presented and how it develops itself out there. It's amazing. But the fact is that us who do know the truth, it is more urgent than ever that we step up and do what we can while we can, because our society's falling apart, crumbling apart, and we have truth, so we need to put it out there.
Yes, in Matthew 10:29-32, we read, Are not 2 sparrows sold for a farthing, and one of them shall not fall on the ground without your Father? But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear ye not, therefore, ye are of more value than many sparrows. Whosoever, therefore, shall confess me before men, him will I confess also before my Father which is in heaven. And then in Psalms 139, 3 through 17, we normally focus on, I will praise thee, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. But let's read the whole thing. For thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance was not hid from thee, when I was made in secret, and curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect, and in thy book all my members were written, which in continuance were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them. How precious also are thy thoughts unto me, O God, how great is the sum of them.
Well, that sums up a bunch, doesn't it? 2 Corinthians 10, 3 through 5 says, For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. Evolutionism, this evolutionary, quote, scientism, this evolution humanism, these are high things that exalt themselves against the knowledge of God. What does God say about any of these issues? And when man comes up with the idea that the opposite of what God says is true and there is no God, then that's a high thing that is exalting itself against the knowledge of God. And we need to be aware of that. We need to do things to help neutralize what's taking place with our own children. We need to talk with them, explain to them, because they are getting a lot of information that is contrary to the knowledge of God.
And so are we as adults.
Absolutely. We sure are.
So are you willing to compromise Genesis with the evolutionary humanist? I certainly hope not.
Absolutely not.
All right. Well, thank you.